Hello, my name is Patrick Trail. I'm the Research and Extension Coordinator here at the Eco Asia Impact Center in Thailand. And today we're just going to show you a little quick overview of Biosand water filtration systems, also known as Biochar water filtration systems. And we're going to just go in a little overview of the theory, how they work, and then show you one community here in northern Thailand that has adopted this practice and is implementing it today and benefiting from it. Thank you for joining us today for this online training session related to Biosand water filtration systems. We will first look at how these systems work and why they're important, and then we will dive into the actual building and design of a 4-barrel 300 liter per day system. I'd like to start off by setting the context, and that is within the larger field of WASH. WASH is the water, sanitation, and hygiene. This is a large umbrella term that includes many different aspects of sanitation, including analyzing the quality of water sources, as well as the transportation, storing, and distribution of clean water. Water filtration is just one piece of this larger picture. However, it is a very important part of this larger set of critical health practices. There are currently many different low-cost water filtration options out there. Perhaps you've seen some of these. One of the most common systems is the single-column Biosand water filtration system, pictured here on the top right. This type of system is most suited for use in household or single-family use. You may have also seen solar water filtration systems, solar water disinfection, using sunlight to purify water. Or maybe you've seen small systems like a Sawyer water filter designed for camping and people camping out in the wilderness. These pull water through a series of microfiber tubes. These are used for individual use. Then there are also larger systems, scaled up versions of what we'll be talking about today. And one of these is the 2,000 liter per day system, more suitable for, say, a community or village level. When we talk about water purification and water contamination, generally we can categorize it into three categories of contaminants. There's the physical. These includes soil, silts, sediments, manure. Then there's the biological. These are living microorganisms like E. coli, amoebas, parasites. And then finally, a third category would be the chemical contaminant. And this includes fertilizers, pharmaceuticals, pesticide runoff, things like this. Unfortunately, many low-cost water filtration systems do not address the third type of contaminant, the chemical contaminant. Most are focused on removing the biological and physical. But what makes the system that we're talking about today unique is that it removes contaminants from all three: physical, biological, and chemical. Also, when we talk about water filtration, there are essentially two types of risk we are trying to minimize. There are the acute risks, the immediate risks, and there are the chronic risks, the long-term risks. Many low-cost water filtration systems target the immediate or acute risks, which include the biological contaminants. These are things like parasites and waterborne illnesses, the things that cause many issues such as diarrhea and dysentery. However, it's also important that we address the long-term chronic risks. Things like chemical, pesticide, and fertilizer runoff typically fall into this category. A lot of water filtration systems are used in disaster relief settings, and where the primary concern is the acute immediate risks, the biological, microorganism, parasite type risks. But when we talk about long-term community development, we want to address both the acute and the chronic risks. And so we're trying to remove contaminants from all three categories: physical, biological, and chemical. I'd like to just take a moment to highlight some of the low-cost water filtration systems that exist so that we can compare the 300 liter per day system and see how it fits in and where it can be most appropriately used. So you may have seen the household ceramic pot water filtration systems. These are pretty common, and these are designed to filter water just a few liters at a time and are targeted at the household level use. These are built using a highly porous clay material and sometimes with a silver cast into the clay, capable of removing the physical and biological contaminants in water. These filter systems are great because they're portable and small, and they can be conveniently placed in the home or household. However, they do filter water slowly and in smaller quantities, so they are useful and helpful, but on a smaller scale. The other system you may be familiar with is the single column Biosand water filtration system. You may have seen these in various parts of the world. These are commonly used in development projects and international development. This water filtration system can filter several liters of water per day and is still used for the household use, but may be capable of supporting a family or two or three. This single column Biosand water filtration system uses various sizes of gravel and sand to filter out physical and biological contaminants. To filter out the biological contaminants, it develops what is called a biofilm. This biofilm sustains a colony of microbes that outcompete harmful bacteria. This allows the system to address the biological microorganisms, the living contaminants in water. And so we'll speak later about biofilms and biolayers as they are a part of the system we'll be speaking about today. This type of water filtration system has been very successful around the world. It is easy to make, it is easy to replicate, and it is easy to maintain. The system we'll be focusing on today is the 4-barrel, 300 liter per day Biosand water filtration system. This is essentially a scaled up model of the single column system that we just looked at, with a few added components to make it more effective. I'm not going to get into the differences now, but we will look at the system in depth throughout this presentation. The 4-barrel, 300 liter per day system can easily be scaled up. A typical scaled up version is the one seen in the photo below, and that is a 2,000 liter per day system. These systems are pretty commonly used here in Thailand and in Southeast Asia, and are constructed using cement rings. They use the same gravel biofilm layer to remove physical and biological contaminants, and they also include a charcoal portion, such as in the system seen before. The 2,000 liter per day Biosand water filtration system is most appropriate for a village or small community. The system uses low-cost materials, is also easy to replicate, and is relatively easy to maintain. In fact, there are no mechanical or moving parts in these systems, and they're easy to maintain with the parts. There's no worry of parts breaking down or parts that cannot be sourced locally. So from here on out, we'll be discussing the 4-barrel, 300 liter per day Biosand water filtration system. You can see in the photo below the arrangement of the 4 barrels, and you can see in the 3rd barrel we use charcoal or activated charcoal. So before we discuss the system and the design and how we build these systems, I'm going to pause here and take a brief moment to explain and describe how we make charcoal or activated charcoal, which is a necessary step in the production of these systems. Charcoal can be purchased. It can be brought in from the outside to use in these systems, but we do like to teach and train on how to produce charcoal or activated charcoal. This is especially important for systems that will be made in remote rural areas where transportation may be difficult, or the sustainability of these systems can be improved should the local community know how to do it. So we think it's important to discuss the production of charcoal. Before I give you a quick overview of activated charcoal production, I'd just like to mention that we do have a separate training video on this material, on this topic. And so I would like to encourage you, if you want to learn more about the production of biochar or charcoal, you can download that video and you can access that from Echo. And we go in more depth on how to make charcoal, different systems, different scales. And we talk about different uses of biochar. Biochar can be used in soil amendment, improving soil quality. It can be used in small amounts in feeds for livestock. But today we're just going to do a short, brief overview and we're going to keep a focus on high quality activated charcoal for the use in water filtration systems. So when we talk about charcoal production or activated charcoal or biochar, essentially we're talking about stabilized carbon. Carbon comes from any living material. Carbon is in sticks, leaves, straw, and we basically can source this carbon material from waste products and things used on the farm. This carbon material, which you can see in the photos here in a zoomed in version, is just a highly porous material, and it acts like a sponge in these systems to hold on to biological contaminants and chemical contaminants. Making activated charcoal is quite a simple process. We do this by burning the material, but it is not a typical combustion or typical burning process. We use a system of pyrolysis. So when we talk about pyrolysis, we are using high heat and low oxygen. We're creating a high heat, low oxygen environment, which allows us to stabilize the carbon in the material instead of losing that material up through smoke, through carbon dioxide, and losing it to the atmosphere. By doing pyrolysis, we can preserve and keep this highly porous carbon material, which is very beneficial when we talk about water filtration. To make activated charcoal, we can use many different organic materials, including corn cobs, wood chips, rice husks, prune tree branches, or old fencing or trellising materials typically found on the farm. In fact, one of the benefits of making charcoal or biochar is that it can also help us manage waste on the farm. We're taking something wasteful and turning it into something useful. Indeed, the production of charcoal allows us to reuse our waste products on the farm into something valuable and, in this case, useful in water filtration. So to make biochar or charcoal, we use different kiln designs, different ways of burning or pyrolyzing material. On the right-hand side, you can see a typical low-cost system that we use here on the Echo Farm. This kiln is made out of a 200-liter barrel with some holes drilled in the bottom and a simple chimney on top. Because elimination of oxygen is critical to the process of pyrolysis, we only allow air to be pulled into the system through a small number of holes in the bottom of the barrel. But by and large, this is a low oxygen environment. The chimney helps create high heat, and this combination of low oxygen and high heat allows us to create the stabilized carbon that we need for water filtration. This system is also called a TLUD, or a top-lit updraft system. This means that we are lighting the fire on top of the material instead of underneath the material. So instead of burning the material itself, hot air is pulled up from the bottom through the material. This process produces a very clear smoke. This clear smoke is clear because we're not losing the carbon through carbon dioxide in the smoke. Instead, we are preserving the carbon in the material. So this is actually good for the environment as well, for air quality. On the left, you can see a loaded kiln. We pack the material relatively tightly to maximize the amount of charcoal we can produce per burn. On the Echo Farm, we use a lot of bamboo, as we have a lot of bamboo waste from trellises, from our seed production, from fencing in different farm projects. As a result, we always have old bamboo laying around, and it's perfect for making charcoal. You may have other good organic carbon sources on your farm. Okay, what you're looking at now is a zoomed in picture of activated charcoal. As I mentioned earlier, activated charcoal is a very highly porous carbon material. If you looked at a piece of charcoal under a microscope, this is what you would see. You would see a material with many thousands of holes, little tiny porous holes. And this high porosity is what makes activated charcoal very useful. This carbon structure with all of these holes acts essentially like a sponge. And this sponge allows the activated charcoal to hold nutrients, microorganisms, biological life, and other contaminants that we want to remove from the water. The chemical structure of the activated charcoal is also very important. The surface of activated charcoal is electrically charged, and this allows charcoal to adsorb chemicals as they are attracted to the carbon like a magnet. So it essentially attracts other chemical contaminants out of the water and holds them onto the carbon structure like a magnet. Okay, now that we have briefly overviewed charcoal production, let's turn our attention back to the water filtration system itself, and let's look at how we design and make these systems. Just before I go any further, I'd like to say that many people and many organizations have put in a lot of work into coming up with these systems, and ECHO has learned much of what it knows about this system from an organization called Aqueous Solutions. They have done the majority of the work to design and implement these systems. So credit goes out to them. We've also adapted materials from an organization called COST, which is the Center for Affordable Water and Sanitation Technology. And they have several great materials on their website. And so this presentation is really a combination of materials adapted from both of these organizations, combined with some technical and on-the-ground experience from ECHO partners. Okay, if you haven't ever seen a 300 liter per day system, this is essentially what it looks like, and this is the breakdown of each barrel. So in the 4-barrel system, you'll notice that the flow of water between each barrel is very critical. The required flow is illustrated by the blue arrows. In the first barrel, water is coming into the system from outside. This water may be coming directly from a river or a pond. It could be flowing from a storage tank or a well, or it could even be bucketed in. But regardless of the source, a float valve is used on top, and that controls the amount of water coming into the system, and it allows the water to be released for use as it's being emptied and used. This first barrel is filled with various sizes of rocks, and this is known as the gravel roughing barrel. And this first barrel will remove a lot of the physical contaminants out of the water, bigger pieces of sand and sediment and physical things that may or may not be visible to the naked eye. Okay, the second barrel is what we call the Biosand barrel. This is where we have various sizes of sand, and it also removes a portion of the physical contaminants, but is also very important in removing the biological material. And this is arguably the most important barrel in the system. And this is where the bio layer or biofilm is housed. And we'll talk more about that and how the biofilm, a living colony of bacteria and microorganisms, is used to outcompete and remove other harmful biological materials. By the time the water gets to the third barrel, a majority of the physical and biological contaminants would have been removed. And this third barrel is important as it removes much of the chemical contaminants and any remaining biological contaminants as well. The final and fourth barrel is a storage tank. This storage tank can vary in size, so many of our partners have opted for a much larger fourth barrel, but this is essentially where the clean water is stored and can be used for drinking or household use. Again, you'll notice that we have outlet valves on the bottom of each of these barrels, and we'll talk about how those are used for maintenance of the system going forward. Okay, before we really get into the design and setup of the systems themselves, it is important to talk about site location. There are a few key factors that need to be pointed out first. First of all, we want gravity to do the work. If we're using water that is not coming from a pressurized water system, if it is coming from a stream or a water tank, we definitely want to situate the system downhill of the water source, whatever that is. Second, we want a shaded area. These barrels should not be in direct sunlight because they contain living organisms in the biofilm layer. And so we do want to prevent the biofilm from heating up and killing those beneficial microorganisms that help us in filtering the water. And then lastly, we want the barrels to not be clear, and we want to discourage the production of algae. And so by having a barrel that is not clear, sunlight will not be allowed to enter in the system and algae will not be formed. And then it goes without saying that these systems work really well on a level surface and should be placed as close to the household or village or point of use as possible. Okay, so we will now look at each barrel individually and talk about the different components. So in the first barrel, you'll notice that all of the measurements are included. And so for a list of component materials, including the fittings, pipes, barrels, you can refer to the booklet produced by Aqueous Solutions. And this will be included in the resources for this virtual workshop, so you should have access to that. They have done an excellent job of laying out all of the required information you'll need when it comes to constructing this system. We will simply explain and walk through each step. At the same time, this system can be tailored and adapted. So I do want to encourage you to innovate and make your system the most useful and most appropriate to the context that you find yourself in. So in barrel 1, it is important to note that the water is coming up from the bottom. As water pushes up through the gravel, filling the barrel, particulates and sediment will settle and not pass further into the rest of the system. Notice that the largest rocks are placed on the bottom, followed by medium-sized gravel, and lastly, finer gravel. As the water passes up through the rocks, increasingly small pieces of physical contaminants will be removed. Removing sediment in this first barrel is also very important in keeping the whole system from becoming clogged up. So the outlet valve at the bottom of this barrel is very important because it can be used to flush the system and remove sediment that builds up and is collected. Regular flushing of this system keeps the system from running smoothly and prevents clogging. In terms of the float valve, there are many different types available. Here we are simply using a simple float valve such as what you might find in a toilet system. And this simply opens and closes the inlet water pipe as the water is being used. Please note that the gray block in the diagram is simply for diagram purposes and is a cutout to highlight the components necessary. It is not an empty space, but is actually just typically filled with large rocks. One of the things we find here in Thailand is that our water has high iron content. So removing iron actually is important in this barrel. As groundwater interacts with oxygen coming up out of the well, a lot of the iron precipitates out, and so that actually would happen in this barrel. And again, that can collect at the bottom and be flushed out. All right, moving on to barrel 2. Barrel 2 is arguably the most important barrel, as this is where we take care of much of the biological contaminants in the water, such as E. coli, Giardia, microorganisms, things that cause sicknesses like diarrhea and dysentery. When we talk about a disaster relief setting, this is probably the most critical component, and that's why you see a lot of single column Biosand water filtration systems used in various disaster settings. In barrel 2, the water is not coming up from the bottom. Instead, the water enters at the top of the barrel and moves from top to bottom. As the water moves through the sand and fills the second barrel, physical contaminants are filtered out. However, more importantly, this second level of physical filtration is where the creation of the biofilm occurs. This is probably the most vital piece of the Biosand water filtration system. Basically, what happens is during the first 30 days of the running of this system, a living colony of microbial life is established in the top layer of the sand. This colony is able to outcompete and remove other microbes that enter the system. It does take a little bit of time to establish this living biofilm, and it does need to be maintained as it's a living system. However, the added benefits it offers in filtering out biological contaminants is critical. When talking about water filtration, it is important to remember that there are 4 key methods of water filtration in this system. The first one we've already alluded to and already mentioned, and that is a trapping. As you can see in the diagram, trapping occurs as the gravel in the barrel catches and contains the particulates or physical contaminants in the water. As the spaces between the rocks and sand get smaller and smaller, the particulates will get trapped and will not be able to pass through. A secondary method by which water filtration happens is through predation, and this occurs with the biological living materials. You can see here in the other diagram. This happens in the biofilm layer, and this happens as a living colony of beneficial microbes preys on and consumes new microbes coming into the system. So this diagram gives an overview of what's happening in a biofilm layer and how it works. When we begin to run our Biosand water filtration system, microbes already living in the contaminated water are introduced into the system. In the first couple of weeks, as the water filter is used, the biofilm or biolayer grows as the colony is established in the top layer of the sand in the second barrel. Initially, these microorganisms in the water will feed on whatever is already present in the sand. But as the colony grows, this food source will run out. And after a few weeks, the colony will find itself perpetually hungry, and these microbes begin to look for additional food sources. Therefore, any new contaminated water entering the system containing any microorganisms will be consumed by the existing microbes that have established themselves in the biosand layer. The system is able to effectively prevent living material from passing through the system by outcompeting any microorganisms or contaminants that are living in the water coming into the system. So here we can see the efficacy of the biofilm over time. You'll notice that the water filtration system does not immediately effective for use on day 1. Initially, a lot of the physical contaminants are moved, but it takes approximately 15 days before the biofilm is established and the biological contaminants begin to outcompete each other and become filtered out. By day 30, roughly, approximately 90% of the pathogens will be removed. You will notice a small dip in the graph, and this occurs every 1 to 2 months when we perform what is called a swirl and dump. And this is just part of the maintenance cycle where we actually disturb the sand and remove any of the materials that have been collected, and this prevents us from clogging the system. So that's simply a piece of maintenance. And so you will see a temporary decline in the efficiency of the system. What's most important to remember is that these systems do take 15 to 30 days to become fully effective in reducing and removing the biological contaminants. All right, this is a picture of a bio layer, of a living biofilm layer in a biosand water filtration system. It looks like a sludge on the top layer of the sand. It looks terrible, but this is an effective system that removes any incoming biological materials. This is also known as the Schmutzdecke, which is a German word and is named by the German scientists that discovered this process. So without getting too heavily into the numbers or the science, I will say that previous analysis of these systems, previous research, has shown that these biosystems can be very effective at cleaning water. As much as 99% of pathogens are filtered out in just the first 2 barrels. By the time the water comes out of the second barrel, the bulk of the physical and biological contaminants have been removed. You can follow up with some of these research materials for further reading. By the end of the second barrel, after coming out of the Biosand barrel, much of the acute risks that we've talked about have been addressed. However, there are still the chronic risks, and this occurs in the third barrel. A few moments ago, we looked at the first two barrels of water filtration, and we talked about trapping and predation. In this third barrel, we'll talk about adsorption. Adsorption occurs as the electrical charge of the activated charcoal in this barrel acts like a magnet to hold onto the chemical contaminants. As the water comes in through the top and moves downwards through the activated charcoal, chemical materials such as nitrates or fertilizer runoff, pesticide runoff, these are filtered out through the process of adsorption, where they are attracted to the charcoal like a magnet. And then finally, the fourth method of water filtration occurs in what we call starvation. This occurs as any pathogens that have survived to this point will find a complete lack of food sources in this dark charcoal barrel, and there will be nothing for them to live off of or survive on. And by the time they have gone through the sand and the charcoal, they will have died. So by the time the water has reached the fourth barrel, it is complete, it is clean. The fourth barrel is simply used for storage and is where we keep our clean water. These fourth barrels can vary in size. It can be the same size as the other barrels, or we can use larger tanks for a higher volume of water storage. One important thing we need to highlight in this presentation is that this water system works at a very calculated speed. People often ask us if we speed this process up, if we can move the water through the system faster, say 600 liters per day instead of 300, couldn't we produce more clean water? And while this is an excellent question, we need to point out that this system is designed to move water through at a calculated speed, and that is roughly 1 liter for every 5 minutes, which also calculates to 300 liters per day. This recommended flow rate allows time for all of the water filtration methods to occur. It allows physical contaminants to be effectively trapped. It allows the established microbes in the biofilm layer to prey on the new microbes entering the system. It allows time for adsorption and starvation to occur. If we move the water through the system too quickly, there will not be sufficient time for all filtration to happen. And poorly filtrated water is not what we're going for. All right, the last piece that we want to point out is the PVC pipe you'll see here in the fourth barrel. This PVC pipe is used to adjust the flow rate of water. If water is moving too quickly through the system, we can raise the PVC pipe upwards. Or if we want to increase the flow rate, we can adjust the pipe downwards. These adjustments work to change the water level in the overall system and create a faster or slower flow rate that more accurately matches to the recommended rate. Adjusting the flow rate is necessary because sometimes the system will clog over time and slow down. Finally, it's very critical that we consider this final barrel of clean water, and we want to consider how to keep the water clean. This means that the storage barrel must be well sealed. When we have clean water that's gone through all of the filtration systems, we want to keep it clean, and so we don't want any back contamination of the water. So we need to work with communities that will be using these systems to realize that dipping water out of the top of the container is not appropriate, as it can back contaminate the water. Likewise, when water is collected from the tap, no contact should be made between the tap and buckets or containers being used. Things like this will help maintain and keep the clean water clean. Okay, as we've now looked at how these systems work and how they're designed and made, one key component that we need to talk about is maintenance. There are a few things we recommend in the maintenance of these systems. We recommend a monthly backwashing of the system. This is done using the valves at the bottom of each barrel. We recommend that once a month, these valves should be opened and water run and flushed out to remove what is collected at the bottom of each barrel. Secondly, we recommend a swirl and dump. Over time, as dirty water passes through the Biosand water filtration, particulates accumulate and eventually will clog the system. This slows the rate of filtration such that the system is no longer useful. So to declog the system, you can stir the sand in the second barrel and put the particulates present into suspension. And we can make the water murky by swirling our hand in the top of the second barrel. These particulates can then be skimmed out off the top of the water with a bucket. And finally, the system is allowed to settle back and the biosand layer will be reestablished. This swirl and dump maintenance process is recommended once a month, but it also depends on how much the water system is being used and may not be necessary that often. Lastly, as I mentioned, it is generally a good idea to monitor these systems. And one thing we want to monitor is the flow rate. And depending on how much they're being used will determine how often they clog. So the final recommendation is that we replace the charcoal maybe once a year. Maintenance is definitely an important part of this system. In fact, the proper introduction of a biosand water filtration system to a community is not only about introducing this new technology, it also involves a development piece as a community learns to use these systems, to maintain these systems, and to understand why it's important to do so. So it is incumbent on those introducing these systems to cover and educate on these processes. We have included this graph to determine the volume and replacement frequency of the charcoal. So it does depend on the size, the volume of charcoal used, and the frequency of the system being used. But generally speaking, we think it's wise to aim to replace the charcoal maybe every 1 year. To wrap up this presentation, we're going to look at a little bit of a case study and see one of these systems in action. So here are a few photos from a system actually being used in a village in northern Thailand. And you can see the water coming into barrel 1 is very contaminated. You can see the orange here is a high level of iron. As it passes into barrel 2, much of the heavy physical sediments are being removed. The physical component is removed, but the water is still dirty and still murky. And so at this point, it's going through the biosand layer, and you can see on top of that layer, the biofilm has already been established. And so you can see that by the time it enters barrel 3, it's been very effective at cleaning up the water. And so as it passes through the final charcoal barrel, we will have even cleaner water. Today we're looking at a biosand water filtration system in Hoi Pa Mejem, a village outside of Chiang Mai, a few hours away from Chiang Mai. And in this case, you can see they're pulling water out of a borehole, and pumping up the water. And originally they had this smaller rudimentary biosand water filter system, just a single column. And this was working fine, but there was a couple of issues. Number one, it was too slow. The other issue is that they have a really high iron concentration in the water here. And unfortunately, this system was not doing a great job of pulling out the iron. I think it was taking care of biological material, but not necessarily that iron. So, Pornsak, he came to one of our trainings at ECHO, and we learned how to do the Biosand Biochar system here that we can see. In this case, they've improved the system, and they're now pumping the water from the borehole up the hill to a larger collection tank, and then from there it's gravity feed into the 4-barrel system. And so that's working really well. And so you can just see here that really good clean water coming out, and
a nice size storage tank, so they're getting quite a bit of volume, and that's helping with producing enough clean water for the village. The fourth barrel in a system like this is the storage barrel. So really here, the first barrel is just water coming in, and here we have the first barrel with the larger gravel and rocks, the settling tank, and that's where a lot of the iron is being taken out. So as it comes in, it goes up through those rocks. Some of that iron is settling out and precipitating out. And then in the second barrel, we have the sand, and here we're having our biofilm layer is being established here. And this second barrel is where a lot of the biological material is being taken care of with that biocolony. It's being outcompeted any pathogens. And then finally, we have the third barrel, which is where the biochar is, or the activated charcoal. And anything left at this stage is being taken care of with the biochar. And this takes care of any chemicals, any nitrates or pesticide runoff. That's will be taken care of here. And we have adsorption happening. And then it finally comes, and they're storing water to about this level, and provides a much higher volume for people. So pretty cool system, and just kind of in a real setting here being used, and a lot of people are benefiting from it.
So as you've seen from the video, the Biosand water filtration system offers considerable utility and flexibility for communities pursuing clean water options. We have not been able to cover nearly every detail of this topic, but we do hope that we've provided a small, helpful jumping off point as you investigate the topic of Biosand water filtration further. We trust that you have gained a clearer picture of this idea, and that you'll be empowered to try this on your own in your own context or community. So thank you for joining our workshop today. If you still have questions about this topic and you'd like to join a training on farm, please let us know. You're also welcome to contact us at any time at ecoasia@ecocommunity.org or at our website at ecocommunity.org. Thank you for taking the time to listen and join us, and we wish you well as you take this technology on to those that can benefit from it.